They supplanted, right? So the new revenue came in, they pulled equal but even more amounts out of the bottom, and that's why you're seeing increased cuts to healthcare and education. So it was a ruse to get you to vote for it, because the polling shows quite clearly that the voters were willing to tax themselves more if they thought it would go to schools and kids. But it's not going to schools and kids. It was supplanting. The other problem was quite simply this. That revenue package, because it's a sales tax, brought in less money than the governor anticipated. And here's the rocket science involved. During tough times, what do Arizonans do less of? Spending. You buy less stuff when you're in a recession. That makes sense. When times are tough, you should buy less stuff, right? But that also means that the state gets less revenue, right? So increasing the sales tax, which is the most regressive tax that we have in Arizona, didn't generate very much money because people are spending less, right? And when the tax goes up, they spend even less. So the money that was generated was much, much smaller than anticipated. And that money went directly supplanting other cuts that they made beneath it. Finally, the last thing to remember is that that revenue was supposed to bring in about $1 billion a year. It's bringing in around 800, which makes sense because of recession. The deficit is about 3 times that size. So when she put that on the ballot and said, this will solve the problem, we will protect education and healthcare, that was just not true. It was just not true. It was less than a third of the money that we needed to solve the problem. The money wasn't dedicated revenue to those sources. And they're pulling more money out of the bottom than they're actually putting in those areas. It was just simply a lie. Yes?
I know you talked about the access cuts. I know that's almost $600 million that the governor says she'll plug the holes in the budget if she gets the waiver, which she won't. That's half of the budget deficit. So if she doesn't get the waiver, we know that, and that she's already got the $225 million or something of higher education cuts. So we know that those of us in public education are going to get cut the next extra $500 million out of that.
Yeah, see, you're so smart. I wish you would run for office.
So can we put you on the spot, besides the 9 of you in the Senate, and I don't remember how many Democrats are in the
20 in the House.
Which of your Republican colleagues are willing to look at anything to raise revenues, to change the tax code, to
Zero.
make it better? Is there nobody down there?
Right, that number would be 0.
That we can help support?
Zero. The number would be 0. So let me talk about that for a second, though, because one of the questions I asked the governor, which she wasn't really happy when I asked this question, I asked her, like, what would happen and what was her plan if, for some strange reason, the president didn't give her the waiver? Or if for some reason she was sued for violating the state constitution and lost, and then wasn't allowed to take this money from the voters, what would she do then? And her response was that she had no backup plan. 0. She has 0 backup plan.
You see?
Right.
Because that budget,
0 backup plan.
that $500 million is more.
It's fake.
That's more than the total money spent on public education. So you could strip every single penny,
No, we
given
still.
to public education, and we still wouldn't probably balance the budget.
No, we actually, public education is still the largest area of spending.
Dollar-wise, if you could say we're giving no money to colleges, community colleges, and public schools, and we still won't balance the budget.
No, you probably could. Let me explain it in just a second, because this is what I think her true intention is. This is important. The governor knows good and well that the president is not going to give her a waiver. She also knows that she would never win a lawsuit under Prop 204. But she has no backup plan, because I believe that her intention is quite simply this. When the president and his administration tells her no, she is going to blame the deficit on the federal government, even though every other state in the country has a deficit as well, right? She's going to blame it on him and his administration, and then she's going to cut the you-know-what out of education. $541 million can be continued to cut out of education. Right now, our spending on universities is about $870 million a year. You factor in the new $171 million cut, then you've got about $700 million. She could take it all out of higher education and leave us with virtually nothing in the pot for higher education. Or she could split it up. Take some of it from higher ed, take some of it from K-12. She could do that. And there is enough money in both of those budgets for her to take it. But it would leave us with an absolutely devastated skeleton of an educational system, which economists all over the world for many years have said that during tough times, you should double down on education. That's where you invest during tough times, because that's what helps you come out stronger on the other side. And we're doing the exact opposite. And I believe that her intention is to do even deeper cuts and try and convince the voters that it's the federal government's fault and not her fault.
Well, won't we
Not her
lose
fault.
teachers?
Oh, we'll lose a ton of teachers. We have to stop her from doing this. Yes.
There was a full-page ad today in the Arizona Republic about a constitutional amendment that would protect education funds from the legislature. First of all, do you know who's behind that? And
Yes.
what do you think about it?
So this isn't, so for anyone who couldn't hear, the question was about this proposed constitutional amendment that would forever protect education funding from the legislature. I just want to talk for a second about how sad that is. Like, don't you think it's sad that we're at a place where we have to go to our Constitution to segregate money so that the legislature can't touch it? Because we don't trust them? There's like a breakdown in the idea of representative democracy there. Something is fundamentally wrong. So that's an issue that we need to address in the long term. In the short term, I can tell you who's working on this effort. It's part of a project that's started by Sandra Day O'Connor, who we all know is a retired Supreme Court justice back in Arizona. She started a project about a year and a half ago called the O'Connor House Project, which is a group of business and elected leaders coming together to try and find some common sense solutions to Arizona's problems. Those solutions were brought to the state legislature where they fell flat. So this is her group. She's also joined with a group called Expect More Arizona, which is a group of business leaders who are focused on excellence in public education and protecting funding for public education in Arizona. In addition, there are several other major business leaders who've joined together. And this is interesting because business leaders formerly hadn't really stepped up to the plate to help in the state legislature, either in preventing cuts to education or to access. And yet, business relies on those two programs. They need an educated workforce in order to be successful, and as we know, many major businesses in Arizona do not provide health care to their employees, and so their employees depend on access for their care. So business wants to protect those two programs, and my hope is that they will actually put their money where their mouth is, step up to the plate, and make that happen. Because for too long, the business community has been supporting ideological extremists who have no concern for public education or access. Yes?
It seems to me that the House and Senate here in Arizona want to do away with public education, and that's really
They do.
their goal.
It is. It's actually, that's not hidden. Senator Pierce has said that public education is socialism and that it should be eliminated. So, yeah, that's their goal. They believe that the private sector will come and take over. Now, the truth is that we do have some really, really good private schools in Arizona. Some of the very best private schools in the country are in Arizona. And they do a great job of educating the very few elite students who are privileged to attend. But for all the other students, our families, our kids, our grandkids, our neighbors, they rely on public schools, just like I did, just like many of you did growing up. And our forefathers envisioned a country where everyone had access to public schools. Everyone had the same equal opportunity to live the American dream. And that, of course, I think is eliminated with the elimination of public schools. But I think that very message is an important message to get out to the voters. They need to understand. They're not just cutting public education funding because we're in tough times. They're cutting public education funding because they don't believe in it. Yes?
Kyrsten, I think you're brilliant, as Karen and Bob.
I'll pay you later, Sue.
Anybody else. But I do have a question, but none of the people in this room put the legislature into office. Could you address and talk about the Tea Party for a while?
Yeah, so I just want to say something about the Tea Party. There's a lot of hoopla about the Tea Party all around the country, and I'm just not that impressed because the Tea Party's been in charge of the legislature for like 20 years in Arizona. It's just they didn't call it the Tea Party, they called it the Republican Party. It's the same thing. Same thing, right? It's the same thing. People are like, oh, the Tea Party. I'm like, really? Welcome to my world, people. I mean, come on. So the Tea Party are these group of disaffected individuals who don't like government, but they want their Medicare. And they're, I don't really understand the ideology of the Tea Party because it's kind of muddled and confusing, but there seems to be a lot of angst about government. So first I wanted to say that I share their angst about government. Government in Arizona has not been doing its job, right? So our forefathers envisioned a country with limited government to protect freedom and to provide stewardship for those who are vulnerable and needed support. Arizona doesn't do those things, right? We've quit doing those things. So the fundamental job of government has been abdicated in Arizona. So my concern about the Tea Party is that I don't think that their goals are going to get us where they say they want to go. If you want a country of freedom, democracy, and liberty, what the Tea Party is advocating for will not get you there. Look at Arizona. We're not getting there. We're getting farther away from that. So my response to folks who are energized about the Tea Party is, welcome to my world, and here's evidence of what the Tea Party will create. And if this is what you think is the right way, if you think this is the right thing for our future, then, go for it. But if you think what's happening in our state is not okay, then now's the time to stand up and talk to the normal, right? Regular, disaffected, worried, stressed out Arizonans all around us, right? And help them find something more meaningful. Because the Tea Party and Russell Pierce and his folks are not the answer. Yes, in the very back.
Call it what it is. It's fascism. We all know it. Survival of the fittest. And that's what they're doing. And they go under the guise of democracy and freedom. What they're talking about is freedom for themselves and the hell with the rest. And they also use the word patriotic. They're not patriotic about Americans at all.
I think that brings a really important point up, and that is that there's often activity that is cloaked in the language of democracy or freedom and patriotism, and that really causes me concern, because I think there's nothing more patriotic than trying to make a difference in your country. There's nothing more patriotic than recognizing what's going wrong and then working hard to fix it. And that's what I think each of us are doing every single day. And I think that we have a duty to reclaim terminology like freedom and democracy. I want freedom. I want freedom, and I want to live in a democracy. And I feel that those things are endangered by the activity we see happening down at the state legislature today. And it's our duty not just to talk to each other here in this room, but to our friends, our neighbors, folks who are bagging our groceries at Safeway. We should be telling everyone about this kind of issue and what's happening. Help them understand how the very, very basic liberties that we all hold dear are threatened with this kind of activity in our state legislature. I'm over my time, so can I take like two more, when do I need to stop? 2 more questions? Okay, then I'm gonna stop. In the back.
I just have a question about cuts to the education budget and charter schools. Charter schools get money just like public schools do. They get part of that pot. So aren't they shooting themselves in the foot there by cutting back the money, and all the people that went to the charter schools thinking that they were making their own little private school, but they didn't have to pay for it? They got public education funds to have their own little individual, whatever they wanted, their view of a school as opposed to sending their child to a public school. All those people, a lot of them have a more conservative outlook. What happens to those people? Aren't there cases where they're actually going to be shooting themselves in the foot more than we realize?
Well, that's really interesting, because the governor's budget actually increases funding for corporate charter schools. Now, you probably don't know what a corporate charter school is, but let me tell you, and you're going to be astounded. These are public schools. Charter schools are public schools. They're publicly funded. But they are run by private, for-profit corporations. So I just want to lay this out so we all understand it. These schools get funding from the state to educate children. But a private for-profit corporation is running the school, which means they make money from the state for educating our kids. So this is directly taking our state tax dollars, not just paying the salaries of the teachers or the bricks and mortar for the school or the books for the kids, but also funding not just the salaries, but the profit margin of the individuals who run these schools. This year, this year, Governor Brewer increased their funding by $1.8 million. And I just want to here's a quick little comparison. She also neglected to fund transplants in this budget, which, by the way, costs $1.4 million a year. So we don't have enough money to fund life-saving transplants for people who are dying, but we have enough money to give to for-profit corporations who are using public dollars to teach our children. There's something wrong there. Last question.
Going back one question before this, I talked to the baggers, people who bag groceries at Safeway. I talked to
My nephew is one of them. My nephew works at Safeway across the street.
I must have talked to him.
You see Jordan, be nice to him. He has big things in his ears. Just ignore those. Just ignore it.
All through the course of my daily life, I run into people in this room and from every walk